Good morning, family. Ron Holland here, host of the Weekend Public Affairs Show, Community Voices on Old School 105.3 and Praise 100.9. Today on Community Voices, I have the distinct pleasure and honor of talking with Neil Harris, founder and CEO of the Urban Mosaic Center for Social Justice. Neil, thank you so much for joining me today.
Ron, I'm so glad to be with you.
Absolutely. In the interest of full disclosure, I should let everybody know, several weeks ago you had an extraordinary forum dealing with the school to prison pipeline. Bakari Sellers, a contributor for CNN, he was their guest speaker. It was a wonderful event, and I do want to let our viewers know not only was the turnout wonderful, but the issue that you were tackling is also important to our community. So tell our viewers a little bit more about Urban Mosaic for Social Justice.
Sure, Ron. Well, first of all, thank you again for having me. It's really passionate for me and passionate for our organization as we deal with this issue called the school to prison pipeline. Many people are unaware of this, but we think schools really prepare individuals for life and for secondary education. But what most people don't understand is that schools also prepare our young people for prisons. And unfortunately, especially with young people of color, they are overrepresented more in prisons than they are actually in college, universities. So that's why, as an educator, it's passionate for me to make sure that we disrupt that pipeline. The pipeline does exist, but we have an obligation, I think, community-wise, family-wise, to really make sure that we're doing all that we can to disrupt it. And that was really the basis for our event that we had last month.
Now, you are literally taking on a huge system. When you're talking about a pipeline, when you're talking about a school system that actually prepares kids for prison, you're talking about taking on a system. How difficult a challenge it is to actually convince teachers and that system that something is wrong here.
It's a really great challenge. It's a really hard task, but I just believe that if we all don't do our part to kind of etch away and erode at the system, then the system will continue to perpetuate itself. And that's why it's so important. And again, we might not grab everyone and we might not totally disrupt the system because we understand the hierarchy and the power that's enacted in it. But as people of the community, if we would just do our part, we'll grab as many as we can.
Yeah. Now, a lot of young folks are on that trajectory, and in talking with young people, there are a lot of reasons, a bevy of reasons why people, particularly our young folks, are actually on that pipeline or in that pipeline. Talk a little bit about how you talk with young folks about actually being involved in certain activities that put them in that pipeline.
Well, every child and every student has a story. And I just believe that many times when we look at students, we see a lot of negativity. But what we must understand, there's always a background to that story. And the first thing you have to do with young people is build relationships. Relationships are key to you actually building trust. People don't really open up to you until they can realize they can really trust you. Once they learn how to trust you, I believe that children begin to work for others first. And if we manage that properly, then we teach them how to believe and work for themselves.
Right.
So I think it's important that before we have this quick fix and before we think it's just this one pill that you can take to fix the problem, you really have to get at the heart of their story. And once they know that the basis behind what you do is real and it's sincere, then you have the inroad to really make a difference in their life and kind of get them on the right track.
Now, I think part of the remedy for this is bolstering the academic acumen of our young people. There are challenges they actually face in the classroom. What are you doing about that?
Well, in the classroom, I believe it's about expectations. I believe that people rise to whatever level of expectations you set for them. You set low expectations, they rise to low expectations. You set high expectations, they rise to high expectations. And we have to make sure that the educators and those that are standing in front of them every day don't look at their situation, don't have pity, don't have sympathy, but realize they are capable beings of being able to learn, to do, and to become, and walking there every day, setting that bar really high and not letting go until you make sure they all reach it.
Now, one major issue is in school and out of school suspension. And of course, if you have a child sitting at home and they're not in the classroom, obviously that opens up a whole range of possibilities in terms of trouble. So how do you deal with that challenge?
Right, so there's a whole idea of zero tolerance policies, and the idea that one offense and you're automatically suspended. We all understand with that type of mindset, it erodes at their education and their academic growth. And I remember as a principal, there were times where we did enact suspensions, but suspensions were always in school. Suspensions were even in my office. It was this idea that you had to have the dialogue and the conversation about the behavior, but the behavior was never to be a substitute, or there was never supposed to be a penalty that would take away from them learning. Yeah. And I think that that's what's important. I think the discussions, peer mediation, they're all type of models that you can use to help remediate and to help individuals understand the behavior. But the other side of it, it can't take away from their learning, because then we are now then contributing again to the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. Now, one of the major issues in the school system today is having resource officers as well as police officers. It can be a bit disconcerting, particularly for a child who happens to have some outbreak and behavior problems. So how do you navigate the whole, especially with the community, because a lot of people are uncomfortable with having police officers in the school system, given the kind of rancor that we see in the community with police.
Right. So it's two-sided here. We have to look at the climate. So we have this current climate where there's a lot of distrust with the police. Yeah. And then we also have this other climate. The flip side of it is this other climate where there's a lot of school violence now as well. So, we're faced with this task of wanting to protect students. We want to make sure students are okay, but not creating this sense of being in a penitentiary or being incarcerated as well. So it's really like this narrow line that you have to walk on, where we really have to build community trust. And that's where the police officers and the parents and the school boards have to really sit down and begin to formulate this plan, where we don't want to presuppose that automatically in certain communities there's going to be certain type of behaviors. But we would change our presupposition to make sure that we understand everyone should start at a level playing field. They should be educated, not just students being educated, but police officers should be educated as well. And once we have that open dialogue, I think we can create a different culture that is not so driven by force or policing, but about caring and nurturing, because there's a difference.
Now, if you had your druthers, and you had the ear of perhaps folks in the federal government as well as local government, what kind of resources would your organization need to actually accomplish the kind of things that you're doing?
Well, I think that when we talk about social justice anyway, I think there's a fiscal responsibility that's tied to it as well. We can talk, we can dialogue, but there's money really needed to get the work done.
Now, how much money would you like to see?
I would love to see $1 million.
$1 million?
Easily. And I just throw that number out, and I say that because when you look at what it takes, not just for students in schools, but for parents, for grandparents, for teachers, and for educators, for all the stakeholders in the community, it requires those type of resources so that all can really professionally develop. I just believe that, we look at charter schools, and I'm not really here to argue the charter school argument, but I don't think that charter schools also are the excuse for not fixing public schools.
Right.
Most students will wind up in public education. So what are we doing there? So to provide the equity of resources and the equity of funding, the equity of qualities of teachers and the teacher experience. Like, what are we doing to not so many students are not left behind? Some of the districts that do the worst are those who can't keep teacher staff, high turnover rates, high episodes of violence. So I think we need the proper resources to pour in to get the proper support, the proper training, and the proper development, so that there is more of a level playing field.
Yeah. We only have a couple of minutes left. I do want to ask you, why are you so passionate about this issue?
I'm passionate for various reasons. Being an educator for all these years, I believe that education, things of this nature, social justice, is not just something you do. You really are called to do it. I believe you actually are born in purpose to do it. And I think of all of the many relationships that I've had with so many of the young men that I've come in contact with during my time of education, working in education, and it creates this fire. It creates this passion. The current political climate causes us now to be really awoke and really intentional about what we do. I just believe that I won't be satisfied in life unless I'm doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
And that's what it is for me. Some things you kind of do because you have to do. But I'm grateful. I wake up every morning passionate and actively doing things that make me feel like I'm worth something.
Yeah.
And make me feel like I'm helping somebody else. And I believe in life, if we're not helping other people, then our lives really don't have meaning anyway.
That's absolutely true. If there are people who are perhaps interested in helping you, assisting you in your program, how can you be reached?
I want you to go to the web, and you can find us on the web, www.urbanmosaic.org. That's urbanmosaic.org. Please log on to our website. You'll hear all about us, see some of the wonderful things that we're doing in the community. And of course, we want you to give us a little feedback, and also we would love to have your support.
All right. Well, Neil Harris, founder and CEO of Urban Mosaic Center for Social Justice, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, folks, for tuning in to this week's segment of Community Voices video segment. Certainly appreciate you taking the time out to watch our program. We'll talk with you soon.